Okay, it's going to start in a few seconds. Yeah, it's like loading. Sebentar. It's going to start in a few seconds. Yeah. All right. It's like loading. The live streaming is up. Let me pause my YouTube first.
Michelle, is observers allowed in this room?
No, observers are not allowed. They are allowed to watch from the YouTube channel though. It's for public. Also, I encourage you to turn on your camera. If you can't technically, that's fine. But if you can technically open your camera, use your camera during the debate, we would like to ask you for that. Okay, thank you so much. The live streaming is up. You can guys start whenever you want. Thank you.
Wait. So before we start the grand final, congratulations for reaching the grand final round of SETARA 2020. My name is Randy. I'm going to be the chair of this round, and paneling with me there is Dea and also Fadila. So several announcements. Number one, just make sure that you are going to frequently check your chat box, simply because I'm going to notify the time there. I also suggest you to time yourself, okay? And second of all, before you speak, please make sure how do you prefer the POI to be offered? Is it through chat, or your opponent can simply interrupt you in the middle of your speech? Okay. So, Prime Minister, you may start the debate. You may open the debate.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Kalau for POI, buka aja mic ya. I won't be reading the chat. Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The problem within the status quo is the narrative of which life is very valuable for you to begin with. So parents could not opt in even if they want to kill their children. We reject this narrative. We say that we would allow couples to euthanize their baby, and they were so proud to propose, right? But then we say our sense in this debate is that we don't want to stop our intellect game. Our narrative looks like we say we don't want disabled people that is being suffered in their later life just because their parents want to birth them to begin. We say that cope the greatest is better in the end of the day. We say that in this case, philosophically, baby is a human to begin with. This is the case, also the case with abortion, like because they don't have time to begin with. So yeah, that we say that we would euthanize them because in this narrative we say that we as a couple and parents concede and consent towards the euthanizing that is being made in the first place. The metric of this debate is should be talking about which side of the house grants those baby in later life under their side of the house, or death under our side of the house, or for this parents in the end of the day. Because their case is most likely somewhat of like abortion. The difference is that in which state that you killed those particular child or baby in the end of the day, right? So the two things to brought under this debate is that first, how if not euthanizing will lead to a miserable life for the parents. Second thing, how it will happen for their kids in the end of the day, right? But then several things to be brought is that first we say that euthanizing is still rational. Why? Because when you have this defect and this permanent life support to be hard for you to live in, we say that should be a sensible option to be taken in the first place. That is a sensible option that parents should allow their children, because we say that if people have the right, then we say people have the right to die in the end of the day. But the second principle is that even if they live, they will still suffer. We say that parents should not let their child suffer in the end of the day, because these people that have birth defect and require parental support, they will have their hard time living in first place, right? But the reason why they still survive in current status quo is because science exists in the first place. This leads to those kids that should have died if they live, for example, in middle age or in premature age, still live, right? But then we say that this is not justifiable, because how people opt in into current society is still in the same way that they still ridicule those that have birthright in the end of the day. We say that people in the current society is still the same. We say that it's not justifiable to prolong their suffering. They're most likely live toward not living in the end of the day. They need to come up and here and prove to you on how they have a life worth living rather than suffering that they have no in the end of the day. But then the third principle is that this narrative could not coexist in the current household. That is to say that you could not say that, oh, people have the option to opt in and opt out. We say that it's not possible. Why? This looks like the narrative in the current household that the Republicans or the right wing use for anti-abortion, for anti-euthanize those kind of people, right? Because this narrative has diametrical oppositional in principle force kind of thing. Because without this narrative, people cannot euthanize this baby for two particular reasons. First is because of social repercussion. That is to say that even if they want to kill their baby, they will receive social repercussion without this narrative to begin with. Under our narrative, we say that it's okay for parents to kill their children, and we change the narrative to society in the end of the day. So they won't receive social repercussion under our narrative. But the second thing is that we would adhere, even if like parents will have subconscious bias adhere onto this narrative, even if they know they are not capable of handling that particular children to begin. Even if you know that you as a parent, your kid will most likely having a very hard life, that even you know that if you could just imagine if you become them, you don't want to live that life, you still could not opt into euthanizing them, even if they have the chance to. Why? Because you need to adhere towards the social norm. You need to adhere towards the religious norm that you have internalized. Even without social repercussion, we say that this is still harmful in the end of the day. But then several reasons was the argument is important, because first, we prove to you how this is principally just in first place to not let their children suffer in the next day, in the next phase of their life. Second, we say that how this could not exist simultaneously with the current status quo and the current narrative that we have, right? But the second argument under debate is that how it will hamper their future, right? Because if you don't up in the narrative, or for example, if you take the opposite case, we say that they will live a less happier life. But then the human have inherent to do two things. First is that they have the inherent nature of bully, or for example exclude those that are not don't have the same trait as them. That is why, for example, we bully, for example, even if we are both human, we still bully minority to begin with. That is why we still exclude minority. This is the same para example of those that are different to us in this characters, correct? That is why disabled kids are other than for the different education purpose. This is also why that they are being put in with different schools other than this kind of normal people. Why? Because they will receive social repercussion in the end of the day, because they are different from their peers, right? But then the second thing is that they tend to be envious. This is for the child. We say that they will most likely live their life miserably, live their lives depressingly, live their life regretting, why am I born in the first place, regretting their life, why am I different, why they could play basketball and I could not because of any birth defect, or I have, I need oxygen supply for the rest of my life. I could not play basketball because it will kill me if I play basketball in the day, right? But then the second thing, even if success, we say that we will take the trade-off, right? Because we say that how many disabled and defect people succeed in their life, only proportionate, and those proportionately people are very glorified in the current status quo, because for example, when they are different, they are able to overcome their obstacle, right? But then how much we told you that how much, and we rather take the trade-off of those that are successful to be not born also in the end of the day. We rather take the trade-off because the magnitude of harm is so big. The magnitude of people that is being disabled suffer, and it's not that proportionate towards those that are succeed in the end of the day, right? So but then the third thing is that let's take two scenario, right? In short term and long term. For example, if you are a baby, if you are that particular disabled baby, if you are rich, in short term, your parents may pay it for you. Your parents could just put it whatever resource that you have to in order for you to live, right? But then under those that are not rich, there is the majority, the case of majority of people, parents have more burden to adhere towards their children. Because without this narrative, they cannot opt out. Already being explained that. But then in long term, if that people die, we say that this kind of people will still have to opt in into that particular workplace, right? Because we see in the current status, because those disabled people are hard to opt in into the society and into the workplace that they need to. But this leads to first, if they are having a hard time or they are being suicide and depressed, we say that we don't want this. But then under the long term, both sides of the house ends up the same. That is to say that they are more likely suffer in the end of the day. And then, but then the reason why this argument is important is because first we said that for the magnitude of harm is so big that they suffer for the whole of their life for their children, and second, for their parents, they need to have the very much burden in the day, right? So proud to close.
Vanes spoke for 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Now we're calling upon the first speaker of the opposition team. Here.
Panel, ladies and gentlemen, it was not enough for side proposition to come up here and tell us that parents should all be amazing people and not let their children suffer. It was really key for them to come up here and tell us that people with hard lives should just cease to exist in this world, that people shouldn't be given second chances, that life was a permanent death sentence for these children who are different, right? This is a horrible narrative. Imagine, panel, living in a world that perpetuates these stereotypes, that prop things is the precise reason why these children cannot coexist harmoniously in this world. We beg to oppose. We want to live in a world where you don't have to regret something as fundamental as life itself. So the goal on our side of the house would be that we stand for life. All children with birth defects should be able to not be euthanized. But before I move on, I just want to start with some clarifications. First of all, these are undetected birth defects with permanent life support. And given that these are babies, we won't really get a scope of the pain that they are experiencing, right? We cannot measure how much pain they are in. We cannot ask them, oh, do you want to die? We don't know how much it's actually hurting for these babies, right? What we do know, however, is that permanent life support is keeping them alive. This baby's life cannot be deemed hopeless. But second of all, let's assume that they are getting the best type of life support available. We will be debating on the premise of people in poverty and who can't even get life support to begin with. This is out of the scope of the debate. But thirdly, we support that the child can vouch for euthanasia at the age of 8 after they have gone through life for that long. They know how to express their pain and can communicate with others. But before I move on to my two structural arguments, I want to start with a few independent rebuttals. First of all, a side proposition came up here and told us that this child was going to be suicidal and depressed. Then we say that in this case, it is the child's own decision if they want to commit suicide, right? The child was able to make the conscious decision for themselves. But in this case, we also think there are people to help this child at the age of 8 or 10 or even older than that. There are friends, parents, family there for that child in that moment. We think this is a much better scenario than just to euthanize the child at birth. No, thank you. So on to my first argument on why it's not principally justified to euthanize. There was a lack of model from side proposition. Does this decision require that there are multiple parties ascertaining that this baby will suffer, that the parents are the only party that have to consent? We don't know. So moving on, what is the threshold for when it's actually okay to euthanize a person? We say number one, when their life is in so much suffering that death is better than living. Number two, when they themselves decide to euthanize. Obviously, babies can't decide if they can or if they want to or they don't. Three problems that exist under their side of the house under this premise. First of all, we don't know the extent of suffering they're experiencing, right? Therefore, we are in no right to say if they fulfill the criteria that death is better than suffering, given that babies are unable to articulate the amount of pain that they are in, and we can't just assume how much pain they are in because of different levels of pain tolerance. It's unjustifiable. This therefore leads to three scenarios. First of all, if the baby is actually under life support that isn't too painful, yeah, maybe they have to go through life with a feeding tube, but maybe they can actually withstand this pain. Second of all, even if it is so painful, we say that different kids have different pain tolerance. It isn't up to us to judge. Third of all, but even if they are under so much pain, and we say it's natural for human beings to get used to pain if they experience it 24/7 all the days of their life, right? This means that the pain experienced by them in their life will actually be more bearable at the end. The conclusion of this layer is that given that there is no clear metric of pain we can define, it is not up to the parents who don't know the amount of pain the child is going through to decide. Second of all, let's talk about lack of consent, right? In all justified euthanasia scenarios in the status quo, there must be some degree of consent. Babies cannot actually get this consent that is required. But secondly, the consent that is provided by the parents of these babies is concomitantly unjustified as well. Three substantive reasons to that. First of all, because the origin of the decision is shock. Recognizing recognized, panel, that these parents are most likely not going to be in the right state of mind, right? What do I mean by this? It's necessarily going to be a result of their rash thinking. Because they're disabled from rational thought in this case, the baby is being violated their right from a correct and just decision by their parents. Parents are in no state of mind to literally dictate their child's life based on the kind of shock that they've experienced. But second of all, let's talk about emotional attachment and its influence over the decision. This panel that this child is not some stranger's child. It's this parent's own child, the ones they have to raise for the rest of their lives. Given these conditions, we think there is substantial possibility that the parents are allowing emotional attachment to affect their permanent decision about this baby. A little bit of contextualization here. In the SAS code, we have observed multiple examples in which many parents have been reluctant and hesitant to abort their child for minuscule, insignificant, horrific, and utterly unacceptable reasons, including disability, for mental issues that cannot be reversed, right? In the same way that birth defects, the standard for which can be extremely diverse, right? It's on a spectrum. It can be from genetic mutations that cause major impairments in the child's ability to carry out daily activities, all the way to just the child having a malformed face, right, from nuclear radiation or a mental disability. Given that this is true, therefore, we can safely assert that the parents that may be euthanizing the child for the reasons of shame, stereotypes, for reputation. In no way do we think that this is a world we want to live in, right? It just a distinction, the line between euthanizing a baby for appropriate and justified reasons and those that are not. Reasons that cannot be named and that cannot be declared. We protect the baby from these evil possibilities. Parallel to scenarios in the status quo, such as those in which suffering from mental health issues cannot make the decision autonomously for themselves. For themselves. But third of all, a lack of certainty. There is a lack of certainty in the kind of technological advancement that could occur, right? Panel, we say that it's extremely likely for technological advancement to occur in the next few years. Right now, invention and technology is being made at a rapid pace. Given that this is true, who is to say that, number one, the existing advancements are unable to reserve the effects of birth defects? Obviously, the emotion already states that there is a life support that can be given to this child. Uncertainty cannot be a basis for the decision that is permanent, that is certain to make the child's life cease. A lot of times people have birth defects that can be healed, right? For example, if someone were born blind and had the illness in their heart, these could be solved by surgery. Secondly, it may be, maybe it may seem like a lost cause right now, but given the rapid rate of innovation and technology, there's a high chance new solutions will arise one day. On to my second argument on why this is actually harmful for the disabled child in general, right? Panel, recognize that when we allow for this to happen, it would be a bandwagon effect. The society we live in is so interconnected, meaning that once something is normalized, everyone in the trend. Passing this narrative necessarily means that we begin to dissolve the barriers of moral choices, of what is right and wrong between murder and the choice. Harms under their side of the house. First of all, the opposition will exacerbate the notion in society that disabled people are hopeless and weak, right? The stigma on disabled people will increase on their side of the house. And the reasons will continue by me. Second speaker, extremely proud to oppose.
All right. So the first speaker of the opposition team spoke for 7 minutes and 31 seconds. Now we're calling upon the second speaker of the proposition team. Here.
Okay. Am I audible? Hello? Okay, audible. I'm gonna start my speech. Oh yeah, for POI, you can just unmute your mic, but please don't do it in like a very aggressive way. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take their base case then. Let's take their logic. Even if two babies then are born, we don't think that you can still ask consent to them. Even if like those babies are born in their first, second, and third, do notice that this undetected birth defect usually are shown in, for example, when they are autistic, when they are not able to even, for example, know their opinion. Hence, therefore, you cannot actually still ask consent of them because they don't know what they're doing in the very first place. This defect affects them in the very long term. I think that all of their claims has fallen with this neutralization, right? I'm going to further question only one question in this debate. Which side of the house protect babies? I'm going to further extend my first speaker's argument. But before that, we're so proud to propose, right? 3 points of clarification though. Number one, they say that, oh, as babies who are born with these conditions, it is still, 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 it Oh, sorry. Wait. First point of clarification is that we don't know their pain in the very first place because these are babies and yada yada yada. No, actually, you know their pain. I think if you're someone who is especially uncoupled and you're a parent, when you are already old enough to understand that this kind of babies will be most likely have to go into a special school that is very expensive, for example. When you know that this babies is going to need constant support from other party and they cannot survive on their own, I think that as a parent, you have the rationality and moral compass to understand what kind of defenses, even if you're not a parent, I think that as a teenager or even someone who is completely rational, you understand what kind of grievances these kind of kids go through. But then secondly, they say the response to my first speaker's argument when we told you that this is going to cause them being sad and depressed or even commit suicide is if kids commit suicide, that is okay because that is their decision to do so. I don't think that with this statement they can actually protect babies, right? Because is this even a real statement? I don't understand how they can defend this claim. If they really want to defend this claim, then defend to me why it is okay for them to spend their life just to die at the end of the day anyway. You cannot protect babies under the roof of the house if at the end of the day they are going to commit suicide. But lastly, they say, oh, parents do not have the rationality, so their decision is not able to be trusted. Two responses then. Number one, no, parents do. If they want to, if they did have sex in the very first place, if they consider that they're going to have baby in the very first place, they should also realize what kind of also responsibility and every single possibility that can happen in the very first place. I think that their argument falls, right? So let's move on to my question then. Which side of the house protect babies? Their only claim for this is that under outside of the house, babies is something that is from the couple itself. Hence, you do not have anything to actually any rights to actually kill them. What you also have to notice though, even if these babies are then old, you cannot actually ask them consent. We cannot when these babies are unable to give you consent, when these babies are not rational enough to give you consent, then all the rights and all the responsibility should go into their parents. This is why our stance stands in the very first place. But then secondly, they say, oh, you are going to accentuate gaps between normal and not normal people. This is wrong, ladies and gentlemen. We think that under the side of the house, we will further accentuate that gap. Accentuate that gaps in the very first place, because when you see that these kids are alive, and for example, let's take our worst case scenario that these kids is going to be abandoned. These kids are going to not be loved by their parents and is unable to go to like expensive school that is actually can support them in their life. We think that that is actually what is going to accentuate the gap between the normal and not normal. I think that by this, all of the cases has fallen in the very first place. They should give us new arguments that if they want to champion this debate. I'm going to further extend my argument, right? I'm going to also give you explanations on what opposition might bring in this debate. But firstly, I'm going to answer that in two layers then. Let's play on cases where parents are fully capable because their first speaker never give you an explanation whatsoever. Okay, maybe they can pay for all of their expensive medication, but most likely you will give them to babysitters, right? Because even though you will have money, you cannot guarantee that you will be with their actions. You can see on YouTube parents crying because there are the children's actions, for example. You don't have the mentality to cope with them in the very first place. Hence, even if this kid is going to be alive, you're not going to get your pure satisfaction of love from your parents. We think that that is not something that is good for these children. They will not be able to get unconditional love from your parents. But secondly, let's play on cases where parents are not capable, because these kids exist doesn't only on cases where parents are rich, but also on parents who significantly have different wages, significantly have far less wages, right? We think that in these cases though, this is why it is going to be harmful, because notice that these children have to rely on their parents their whole life. These are the kids that need to have babysitters, that needs to have oxygens, for example, that needs to have like pills or even creams to support their life sustainably. If the one time if one time then this parents is going to die, they will have no one to rely to, right? We think that this is why actually our case matters, because we think that these people actually need their parents their whole life, but then when their parents is gone, exactly this is going to be harmful. Even if those kids is going to be alive under the side of the house, these kids is prone to manipulation, to sexual assault. We think that in the current status quo, there's a lot of cases when these vulnerable children are then being manipulated and exploited because they don't know anything from the world, right? They have to defend to me then how exactly they're going to be prone from depression, from like manipulation, from all of the bad things that this world have, because this world is capitalistic. But ladies and gentlemen, this world is already bad in the very first place. I'm not sure how they are going to survive in the very first place. Under our side of the house, though, comparatively, these children is not going to be manipulated. These children will not struggle with jobs, unlike your side of the house. I think that this is a far more better comparative, right? Because sure, parents may be sad, couples may be sad, but they can actually move on with their lives further. If you have money, you can donate for institutions that stands for disadvantaged babies. But if you don't, you can still volunteer that costs you zero money to begin with, right? I think that even if they're going to bring cases where couples is going to be devastated because of the death of their children, a lot of other like coping up mechanism, for example, already exists. If you feel like you have karma, for example, you can volunteer for these children or even donate for them, which we believe is going to even raise the awareness and actually help society to begin with. If they want to champion this debate, they should defend to me then three things. Number one, how these children is going to be able to survive in this world, where jobs is not going to actually want to have you in their company when you are significantly disadvantaged. The secondly, you also have to defend to me then how parents is going to survive under your side of the house, knowing that not a lot of our parents know how to cope with this, for example, disadvantaged children. But lastly, you should also defend to me then how exactly, even if these children is going to be alive, they are going to be able to survive within depression and all of the manipulation that already have explained in finances case and our side of the house, right? We think that we stand for children who doesn't want to actually be manipulated in this current status quo. We are going to fight for parents and actually still give them alternatives to be happy. We still have happiness under our side of the house. We're so proud to propose this motion.
All right. Prashanti spoke for 7 minutes and 16 seconds. Now we're calling upon the second speaker of the opposition team. Here.
Give me a minute. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. I'm going to start. Panel, recognize that the line between subjective euthanasia and murder is slim. It dissolves even more when we realize how rash these parents are who are in shock after the birth of a disabled baby. We think that subjective euthanasia is murder. We are proud to oppose. One point of clarification before I move on to my rebuttal and then my extension. My clarification will fall on consent, right? We think that consent isn't paramount for disabled babies. We're just contextualizing the subjective nature of this euthanasia, which is literally branching on murder. On to my rebuttals. I have 3 points on rebuttals. Firstly, on their point that it's justified because their parents has conceded and consented towards the euthanasia of the baby, right? 3 responses. Firstly, let's characterize these couples in the status quo, right? The fact that they will consider euthanasia on their euthanizing their babies would mean that they didn't expect to get a disabled child. This means that they are in shock and therefore emotional about the situation. We think that it's unfair to legalize this rash decision. As I'll explain later on, parents actually grow to be more accepting of the disability of the kids, right? But secondly, if this type of subjective euthanasia is legalized, where do we draw the line with what types of birth defects are justifiable to be euthanized? Can we euthanize someone with lower IQ, someone with thinner bones? We need an explanation. But thirdly, side proposition is buying into the extreme narrative that all disabled can't live fulfilling lives. But this is far from the truth. We've seen with people like Nick Vujicic, who met the 3 metrics for living a fulfilling life, which are fulfillment, love, and happiness. We don't think it's realistic. On to my second rebuttal, on their point that the babies needs to be protected. Three responses once more. Firstly, we think that fulfillment doesn't conform to one value of, like, say, playing basketball or going to school and other traditional societal activities. This is a direct response to their question of how kids will survive under depression, right? We think it comes in 3 metrics of fulfillment, fulfillment, happiness, and love, right? We've proven to you earlier with the example of Nick Vujicic on how these 3 metrics aren't consistent with traditional actions, right? Secondly, we don't think that parents are dumb enough to just keep their kids in an abusive school. But even if they are, we think that school isn't a necessity for fulfillment, right? We can get it from other avenues, such as leaving a legacy for the disabled, leaving a progression of movement, such as Nick Vujicic. Thirdly, let's respond to the idea that these kids are a burden and the question of how they're going to survive and their parents, right? Well, simply, they can survive from their parents. Okay, hear me out. This might sound cruel, but guess what? This happens under both sides of the house, disabled or not. There are kids still present these days, 30 years old, 40-year-old, who are either who haven't found a job, such as in Singapore, right? Kids go on until 30 or 35 to finish their university degree. Their parents are still funding their whole livelihoods, right? This is something that's happening under the current status quo. This is something realistic, right? Parents under both sides of the house actually has this burden, right? They've agreed to this when they decided to have a kid. Please respond to this, right? But onto my third rebuttal, on their point that these parents will receive social repercussions. We don't think these parents are the most vulnerable actors in this debate. If they fear social repercussions, they have the decision to abide by societal norms on euthanasia. But even if social repercussions is an important factor in this debate, we think that the subjective nature of societal norms applied on euthanasia is essentially murder, right? Hold on, I'll explain this in my extension. Moving on to my extension on how euthanasia is harmful for society and every individual involved. Panel, recognize that the form of euthanasia talked about in the status quo is subjective euthanasia. It means that parents decide whether or not a certain disability is worth killing the baby for. For other parents, some disabilities aren't justified to be euthanized and some are. This gives a false portrayal for the ability of people to advocate for murder when they want it to happen. We bring you 6 reasons. Firstly, it will become the avenue for people to advocate murder. We think that the point at which proposition justifies the murder of an innocent baby for a condition they can't control is the point at which the line between murder and an attempt at a moral choice is dissolved. What do I mean by this? Well, if we legalize the murder of a baby just because of a predestined condition, who's to say that the life of a baby without a birth defect or perhaps an unfavorable friend has a life more valuable than the baby, right? Than the disabled baby, right? What this looks like is a subjective evaluation of what is murder and what can be justified for euthanasia or for murder, right? Right? If we take side proposition's idea, it will mean that we literally stand for murder because we're choosing to end the life of an innocent person just because you don't like something about them, right? But secondly, this kind of like euthanasia stems from rash behavior. Like I've explained before, right? Obviously, if a couple gave birth to a kid with a birth defect, they'll be shocked. No couple prepares or imagines a life in which they will have a defected kid. This is normal. But this type of shock is what causes rash behavior. A lot of parents will probably be mad or sad and emotional, and this emotion causes rash decision. But more detrimentally, it causes the formation of rash opinions. What does this mean? Panel, realize that opinions can change really fast. My mom told me that she hated me when I was a kid, but she loves me now because I'm less annoying. We think that as time progresses, parents who initially wanted to euthanize their disabled babies will actually learn to value and appreciate the different perspectives of life and the values that these kids bring. This means that it's literally unjust to just allow these parents to kill their babies because they're doing so without thinking straight, right? Even if not, right? Say the parents will hate their kids forever. Let's buy into this narrative. Then this type of euthanasia is literally parallel with murder in that it's taking someone's life just because you don't like them. What's the difference between this and say me killing my math teacher because I don't like the grades she gives me, right? Third reason, third reason. The thing is, with these kind of disabilities, medication and their future is uncertain. We think that even if they're on permanent life support, it doesn't mean they're just a living rock, right? What do I mean by this? 50 years ago, someone with no arm will be considered extremely disabled and having a huge birth defect. Now that technology has progressed, it has allowed them to actually live their lives in a more fulfilling manner as if they're not disabled. We see the same thing done for birth defects such as ADHD, in which doctors now prescribe medication for this. We think that just because they're on life support doesn't mean that they're not humans who are capable of doing regular daily tasks, say like 2 years from now, right? Onto my fourth reason, that it doesn't mean that they can't live fulfilling lives, right? And this is the direct response for their point of the right to die and their point on the disappointment that the kids will face as they grow up. Let's give the metric for fulfillment as being able to be happy, loved, and accomplished. This is the most intuitive traits which gives a sense of fulfillment for the general public, right? We think that these disabled babies are in no way unable to achieve these fulfillments, right? It's a matter of perspective. Take fulfillment for a second. For example, there was a student in Harvard who had a stroke but still graduated Harvard Law. In no way does his disability hinder his ability to gain this fulfillment. For love and happiness, there's been many cases of people like Nick Vujicic who found love and happiness through pursuing a career. We think that being disabled doesn't cripple this ability, but euthanizing them before we find out if they're able to does. Fifth reason, psychological trauma towards parents. Obviously, if these parents didn't choose to get an abortion and actually waited for the whole period of birth, it will mean that they care for the child. They've cared for it for 9 months and will have probably been attached to their baby. What happens when they have to make the choice to murder their baby? Well, I'll tell you, they are traumatized of experiences related with kids. They will probably blame themselves thinking that actions such as eating an abortion pill when they were 16 is what caused their baby to have a defect. Realize that the ambiguous nature of how babies gather their defect is actually harmful because it leaves room for for parents to think about how it occurred and therefore blame themselves, haunting them for the rest of their lives. Lastly, it becomes an avenue for parents to kill their kids whenever their kids don't come out the way the way they want them to. Recognize that once we let parents euthanize their baby based on subjective feelings or whether or not their kids have a disability severe enough to be euthanized, it will mean euthanasia becomes more widely acceptable in many instances. Perhaps if their baby had a small penis or if their baby had a smaller skull, these parents will choose to euthanize their kids. It just opens up avenues to many other subjective murder. All this to say, the act of subjective euthanasia is murder. We shouldn't justify murder. We are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Jonathan spoke for 7 minutes and 27 seconds. Now we're calling upon the third speaker of the proposition team. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
I'm not going to open my cam because it will slow my internet connection, so I hope that's okay. If there's a POI, make it audio because I'm not going to look at the chat. All right. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, wait, sorry. 3, 2, 1. Wait, oh my god, my phone is off. Sorry, guys. Wait. Okay, it's on again. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The reason of opposition to oppose our idea is very contingent. And how their parents are sad is this is literally a justification for the parents to do everything to their child just because they're emotionally damaged. As government, we lessen the sufferings of people. We already have so much awful things happening in the world, and governments want to reduce the percentage of it and fix it. Very proud to propose. A clarification, I'm going to directly respond to the second speaker's statement of that we're killing our kid because we don't like something about them. We are not killing our child just because we don't like them. We are saving them from a life where they are going to suffer more than an average person do. Now I'm going to raise 2 questions in this debate. On one, which side protects people? And 2, which side restores humanity? Okay, let's ask my first question. Which side protects people? It is our side of the house, obviously. The moment parents decided to have babies or decide even to change their pampers, there is no consent at all. And surely they don't consent a life full of misery if they can to. How many parents are driven to depression by feeling that they had failed their child's life a lot? And this doesn't only happen on our side, like how the second speaker from opposition claimed. The first opposition even justify and normalize suicide is okay. They said it's okay for someone who is conscious to kill themselves. Whoa, government does not contribute to that. Who is the one who's actually heartless here? Who decide to let the child live their lives to just kill themselves in the end of the day? You did the murder. You know how the world is. What will your parents feel when they have discovered that you killed yourself because they failed to raise you? Because of their condition, which how opposition wants to avoid about how they're also parents in poverty. Opposition has bited their own tongue. Then opposition don't really care about people's life, right? They don't care the results by this. They're still going to die, and to make it worse, they experience nothing anyone deserves, then die. We actually care about someone who had suffered in their lives, unlike opposition. And we are going to avoid and fix that, which I'm going to explain my second question. But we already justified to you that we're avoiding this. They can't even feel a thing. For example, when you know that you're not ready to raise a child, you decide to do abortion, right? Because you know they're going to suffer. You can't afford it, right? You're not ready for it. Opposition are like people who frown upon a fetus, abolish when they know that they are going to be depressed and kill themselves anyway in the end of the day. How high does these grown children struggles to live their lives, right? On our side, we justify this multiple times. This happened in the status quo, and the opposition is supporting it. The opposition supports the discrimination, oppression, manipulation that these children experience 2 times. We suffer like a person, like a normal person. We consider like how the second speaker from the opposition mentioned that there are also kids who are able to live their life until 30, right? Even having these birth defects in Singapore, for example, because their parents will afford it. You heard that last line? Will afford it. Right. We consider that they can live their lives if the parents can afford this. Not every parent can do it. It's more cheaper to raise a child who doesn't have special needs than someone who has special needs. I'm so sorry for second speaker when they said that their mom doesn't like them when they were a child and they like them now. But that has nothing to do with this. We consider that there are also specialized centers that can help you to live your life like everyone else, right? But unfortunately, all of this costs money and they are not free. Therefore, it is more harder for your parents to do so, and it is not justifiable. So when you are a parent, and even if you have money to raise your child, right, you can put them in these centers so they can live their lives like anyone else. But we realize that you're going to be way more protective of your child. Like you're going to say that, oh, you're not going to date this person, and then you realize that intimate relationship with your disabled child is not possible, right? We say that even if you raise your child, you're either going to raise your child by yourself using all your money, or you're going to either not raise your child and let them suffer because you don't have the money, and you're going to be either the parent who just doesn't want to feel the guilt that you killed someone because he's already alive, and you're just going to give money back to them and not have any emotion relatability at all, and just let people raise them, no connection at all. But we can't push a life full of suffering, right? Knowing perfectly they can't sustain by themselves, just for the sake of emotional fulfillment, which we can actually achieve, like how my second speaker gave you an alternatives. Even if the heart of the wrenching parents are doing not okay, we don't care. They're responsible for the birth of the child, and that's the only way we can compensate for that life. Also, on how the difference of kids who are normal are unlikely to get normal jobs like any other kids, even though they graduated the university from a rich parent, if you have a rich parent. And you're going to have experiences that are 2 times from an average person live their lives worse. Now, it's because you might not be able to provide them a life they needed. It's not because we're evil. It's because we consider things and we avoid them to hurt on the child. And then we're also considering that parents are going to be so sad all the time because they're not raising your child very greatly. Now, let's ask my second question in this debate. Where is it? Okay, sorry. Which side restores humanity? It is our side of the house. Now, if you are that guilty by letting your baby die or murder your baby, like how the second speaker say it, which we translated into not suffering in the world, maybe you could pay that burden off by actually bettering the society, right? This is a very great alternative rather than you letting your kids suffer and pay a lot of money for it, and they're still going to live not a fulfilling life, right? You can adopt a child by fulfilling that guilt, right? A child who had gone through so much things that nobody deserves, like children who are left by death of their parents, children who experience calamity, even if you don't. Calamity, if you can afford that. And even if you don't have the money to afford it, you can still volunteer with your well-being, helping children in need, right? And how also opposition mentioned that people, oh, I'm over time. Very proud to propose. Sorry.
Yes, Fiona spoke for 7 minutes and 58 seconds. Now we're Calling upon the third speaker of the opposition team, here.
Okay, wait. Give me a second. Okay, let me set up my timer. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay. So I'm gonna start my speech in. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, realize that their case is contingent upon the fact that these kids' lives are so miserable. We say we do concede to this as a birth defect. There is a low chance that you will have a normal life, but that is not a justification of why you can euthanize this baby upon birth. They still have the burden to prove why, given the fact that our side of the house does stand for euthanasia, just not at birth, when they are older and can make these decisions and are able to communicate, when they're able to find this beauty in life and weigh their choices. They want to protect kids from a suffering life when they can't even measure the metric of pain in which parents are allowed to make these decisions. We are so proud to oppose. Before I move on to my clarifications and my two clashes, I have two strategic flaws I want to point out. Firstly, on how they mischaracterize what disabilities are like. Panel, realize that disabilities are an entire spectrum. There are people who are extremely disabled, meaning that they literally cannot function without assistance. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who are still able to function like a normal human being, just with a little drawbacks. Panel, what they want to do is that they want to generalize all of these disabilities to say that they are incapable of life, incapable of being independent, and incapable of therefore having a life. And onto the second thing that I want to point out as a strategic flaw is a contradiction that they said. They said that parents don't know the expenses of having children, and therefore it is justified to kill their babies if they're unfit to take care of them. But also they said that they knew that parents knew their responsibility when they decided to have kids. Only one of this can be true. It's kind of late to make clarification now, sorry. But moving on to my clarification of consent. Panel, we say that on a basis of consent, we get it. No one concedes to a miserable life. But what I want to bring clarity to in this debate is that under our side, at least children have choice. They can taste how beautiful life is and then make a decision. They can learn how to communicate to explain how they either want to continue to live or not. Their side is the side that takes away choice and consent. They're extremely unjustified. Moving on to my two clashes about, firstly, why euthanasia at birth is not principally justified, and second of all, why euthanasia at birth exacerbates negative stereotypes in society. So onto my first clash. We already told you that firstly, parents are unfit to judge. The parents are unfit because of emotional attachment and how there are hopes of technological advancements, right? But what did they say? They gave us a couple of responses. Firstly, they told us that people with birth defects have a low chance of success in life, right? There are a majority of their cases contingent upon this claim. 3 responses. First of all, let's point out the fact that we don't even know what success means. Are we talking about career success in a relationship? We don't even know. Secondly, even if they did explain to you, I think it's horrible that they don't even want to take this chance of success in life, right? Given our arguments about technological advancements, we see that this rate of success will be higher in the status quo. And thirdly, even if this is also not true, we say that your well-being is not defined by the success that you have. It's the little moments in life where you feel your family's love, where your mom gives you a kiss as she changes your feeding tubes. As shitty as life can be, those are the moments and happiness that people can cling on to. Onto their second response about people with disabilities will be depressed. 3 responses to this. Panel, we say that this is untrue. I think it's extremely harmful for them to generalize these disabled kids to be so hopeless in life that they find no joy. But secondly, even if we buy into there are already checks and balances in society. These disabled through national holidays, people are spreading awareness, and even in their homes and supportive society, we can see that there's so much joy in their lives compared to 10 years ago when people were not even educated about disability. But even under our worst case scenario, under their side of the house. It's worse when they see this norm in society is that people like them are killed because they aren't believed to have a chance to live. Not only will this exacerbate stereotypes that enable discrimination, but also they're gonna look at themselves as worthless too and be depressed. But onto their third response on how they talked about how these kids are not gonna have a chance to live and do well in life when their parents die, right? For three responses, panel realized that first of all, kids with birth defects have a short lifespan anyway. It's rare that they die before their parents, but it's not enough for opposition to say that they are going to die anyways. So let them die. Panel realized that if we have this mindset, who then would want to live in the first place, right? You wouldn't enjoy life. You don't enjoy life because you fear death, but you enjoy life because of the small moments when you joke around with your friends, when you get love from your parents. The ups and downs are what makes life. But secondly, panel realized obviously these parents are already so involved with their lives, meaning that they would already think about these long-term issues, right? They might be kept by a relative, for example, after the parents is passing, or given to a governmental social program that has professional assistance for these kids. Their claims are unsubstantiated. But thirdly, even if they don't have assistance from other people, also realize that as these children will mature and grow, these parents will also try to teach them how to be independent in the real world, teach them how to get a job, how to do the dishes, and etc. But onto their fourth claim about how this is too expensive that would harm the quality of life, right? Firstly, we already told you it happens under both sides of the house as well. In Singapore, it's not unrealistic for people 30-year-old to still like need economic support from their parents. But secondly, okay, if there is an economic burden, we see that's actually less of a burden because they don't have the promise of a longevity in their lives, right? Even if we do, this burden is once again not something exclusive. But finally, we think that we would be much rather take the economic burden for a few years and actually let the parents better understand the disability before they make a rash decision to do so and to actually kill their kids. We want to ensure that we don't garner an avenue for parents to just kill their babies whenever they feel unfit, that obviously this will just normalize this action of killing your children, right? But why is this so important? Three reasons. Firstly, because these are actual human lives that we're dealing with, panel. It's not objects, it's not animals, so we have to really weigh these principal burdens. Second of all, we're the only side of the house that actually defended our principal burden. And thirdly, at the end goal, we do just want a better quality of life for these kids. But to my second clash about why euthanasia at birth exacerbate negative stereotypes in society. We already told you how these stereotypes will be exacerbated where disabled children are seen to be hopeless, right? What did they say? They talked about how social repercussions have not allowed people to follow through with euthanasia in society. Three responses. Firstly, let's take a look at this motion. One case of this debate really may not even change the norm in society. We still live in a judgmental society today. But even if this is relevant, we don't understand whether this is true. We can take a look at abortion as an example. We see that it has already been accepted as a norm. It has been legalized. But the scenarios that they brought, like religious restrictions, still exist when abortion is legalized. Christians still continually protest. And even when someone were to abort, they would be shunned from the church. Don't buy into their false claims. But why is this so important? Because firstly, panel, these are the determining factors to the quality of life, our end goal. But secondly, we are the only side of the house to show how these benefits actually materialize in the real world. We are so proud to oppose.
All right. Katiana spoke for 7 minutes and 19 seconds. Now we're calling upon the reply speaker of the opposition team. Here.
Alright, just give me a minute. Panel and dear adjudicator, this is how you should judge the debate. Two questions here. Which side protects these babies and protects human life? And which side projects a trajectory towards a better world? First of all, the biggest thing coming from their side of the house was that this child was going to be manipulated and exploited. Let me reiterate two responses to this. First of all, we told you that this is not a certainty. Who are you to say that this child was going to be depressed for the rest of their lives? As my third speaker clearly explained to you, life is not about how much you can achieve or how normally you can live. You can go to school, go to college, get a corporate job. Is that what human life has been reduced to? We are so shameful that side proposition wants to support this kind of world. But we also told you because of uncertain technological developments that this was not a certainty, that this child was going to be disabled for the rest of their lives, right? But let's say even if this child is exploited and they don't like their life, at that point in their life, they're going to have a much more concrete understanding of their lives, right? Sure, a lot of people commit suicide even today, but most people don't actually commit suicide just because they're not happy, just because they're a little bit different. Life provides people with experiences and the ability to rationally think. We think this is better than the killing of a child for a predestined life of supposed shame. Second of all, the second thing coming from side proposition was income differences, and that the parent wasn't going, and that poor parents weren't going to be able to sustain the kind of life support that these children need. We already told you it happens under both sides of the houses, right? In Indonesia, and as we gave examples of Singapore, there are so many people coming out of college that was paid by their parents to live off of their parents' allowances. So many kids here in Indonesia that are so spoiled and reliant on their parents, right? But second of all, okay, even if it is an economic burden, we say it's actually less of a burden because they don't have the promise of longevity in their lives, right? Even if we do, this burden is once again not something exclusive. Thirdly, finally, we think that we would much rather take the economic burden for a few years and actually let the parents better understand the disability before they make a rash decision that they're going to regret for the rest of their lives, because now they're murderers, right? But also, we want to ensure that we don't garner an avenue for parents to just kill their babies whenever they see fit. So on to my second question, on which side project the trajectory for a more progressive world? We already told you that there will be a bandwagon effect. The society we live in is so interconnected, meaning that once something is normalized, everyone will join in the trend too. The passing of this narrative necessarily means that we begin to dissolve the barriers of moral choices and of what is right and wrong. Four things that we've explained to you. First of all, opposition will exacerbate the notion in society that disabled people are hopeless and weak, right? When we let euthanasia occur in birth, it shows the world that we shouldn't even waste our resources and time anymore on these people. Why don't we just kill all disabled people in our world right now, right? This has two main impacts and three actors. First of all, it'll increase the stigma of disabled people. Now in society, disabled people are going to be seen as a lost cause. Second of all, it'll encourage other parents to give up on their disabled child from birth. Obviously, this would encourage more parents to give up and not fight for their children. Thirdly, it encourages other parents to resent their disabled children. And we're talking about parents who already didn't let their child go through euthanasia. What will happen is that they will resent their kid, as they not only already look at them as a burden, but they think of the alternative. Now that it is possible, what their life would have been, on whether they would have killed their disabled child. But second of all, at what point is it murder? And at what point is it indirectly but intentionally making a decision of a moral right? Present society with a perfect stepping stone towards allowing murder, which is exactly what proposition supports, the kind of world proposition wants to advocate for. Analysis on this would be that it's a subjective evaluation of the situation. Proposition argued that it's a factual thing that the child has a defect, but what is not as objective as this is the fact that the child will not live a happy life, that the child will not grow up to be an unsuccessful person. We cannot assume that these supposed facts are predestined at birth. What we do inside opposition is we provide the avenue for society to begin to blur the lines, right? The next thing we know, we might be performing mass genocide of types of people we just don't like. They will start killing people with mental disabilities, malformed faces, the list goes on. But lastly, opposition failed to provide us with the type of standards for euthanasia. For deep birth defects, the spectrum is diverse. We told you it was anything from a malforming of your face all the way to a disease. These things haven't been provided by site opposition. We're extremely proud to oppose.
All right. The reply speaker of the opposition team spoke for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Now we're calling upon the reply speaker of the proposition team. Here.
All right. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panelists, the way you should judge this debate is through two clashes. Number one, I'm going to talk about consent. Second, I'm going to explain to you the likelihood of success, something that they should defend in the very first place. But lastly, I'm going to actually turn this debate. I'm going to explain to you, even with their three parameters of fulfillment, happiness, and love, they can still lose in this debate. We will tolak angin champion this debate, right? So first, I just want to point out that all of you are saying is that we are normalizing murder in this debate. Panels, you don't murder these kids because you have a grievance towards them. That is different from you killing your math teacher, Jonathan. But you want to kill these babies is because you're having the rationality to not raise them out of the harsh world to begin with. I think that this is a very different thing and a very far thing. But then let's move on to my first question on the point of consent. I think that they never defend to you when I told them, even if under the side of the house this baby is going to be alive, they are still not rational at the end of the day anyway, right? Because we told you that sure, maybe not all forms of disadvantage is autism. Maybe they don't. Maybe they like a certain part of their body. But sure, maybe we think that under our side of the house, those kids or who are having autism and disadvantage is also have a lot of problems in the very first place, and they do not have the rationality to begin with. They should defend to me then how exactly these children who is autistic and actually do not have the rationality unlike their parents can do so. We give you reasons why parents should be the one that you should be reliant of because they have the rationality. They know what kind of job fields this kid can go to, but your children do not know if whether or not KFC is going to actually hire you as their worker, for example. Then right. This actually move on to my point of likelihood of success, or point of future job. This is very important panels because this is what champions us at the end of the day anyway. We cannot come here and say that in Singapore or in whatever part of the world, there are still people who is, living in their 30s and 35, but then they still need their parents' support. These scenarios happen because they don't fulfill what the company wants. For example, they don't have enough working experiences. They don't have enough score to be in a certain position. The difference is these children, whether or not they're going to be smart or whether or not they're going to be genius, will never be hired at the end of the day anyway. This is why our side stands, right? Because no one knows what happened in the future, but we know what is certain though. They need life support and they cannot sustain by themselves. And their life will be significantly different with others, right? The success under government is never certain, right? Under opposition, I mean, because their happiness and their success is uncertain. But under our side of the house, their absolute grievances, like physical and economic, is certain, ladies and gentlemen. This is why to eliminate this by actually using euthanization. If they want to champion this debate, which I don't think that is able anymore, they should tell us then how this kid is going to be just like everyone else. How these kids can go to normal private or public school, for example. I don't think that they can champion this debate because they're not able to defend us that question, right? But then there are three parameters then. Number one, on the point of fulfillment. I don't exactly understand how they can fulfill this parameter because Katiana, not everyone is rich because not everyone can afford SLB or even babysitters 24/7. We think that parents who doesn't have wages, for example, of our parents who has significantly smaller wages are also a lot of people who exist in the current status quo. You know how much poverty line is actually existed in the current status quo, right? We think that all of this, their argument cannot stand on their own principle. But secondly, they told us about points of happiness, how you're going to be happy with the small moments. This is not true because I already characterized to you that this parent will most likely give it to their babysitters. So when they told me, oh, their mommy is going to give them a bottle of milk, no, your babysitter is going to give you a bottle of milk instead. The happiness doesn't exist under our side of the house, but it does exist under our side of the house because we told you that you can move on, that you have coping up mechanism as a parent, and as children, you don't have to even face the harsh word, right? But thirdly, they say, oh, love. This is something that is completely irrational because how exactly that you can get love? We think that in the current status quo itself, these people are already manipulated. We give you 5 characterizations of how decisions are manipulated and exploited. We think that the trade-off is much more worse under the side of the house. Hence why we do not guilt trip our parents. We do not raise them from all of the bad possibility that these children can have. We're so proud to propose Tolak Angin Champions Studies debate.
Prashanti spoke for 4 minutes and 16 seconds. Thank you everyone for the debate. Furthermore, Rachel, the head committee of English debate competition SETARA 2020 will take over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rahma.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for the debate.
Thank you so much for the debate. I appreciate all of your participation and your willingness to participate in EDCS 2020. I also want to thank the educators for educating today. For announcement, we will announce the winners and the 10th best speaker on the closing of SETARA. That is 10th October. That's on Saturday, I believe. So if you cannot attend, please let our comedy know. You can contact Livia or Hasna. But if you can, that's great. For further information, we will contact you We will also post it on Instagram at 70 English Community or setara.70. If you have any questions, you can go to the WhatsApp group and contact me directly. Thank you guys.
Tadi kapan Kak pengumumannya? Sorry, tadi putus.
10 October. It's on Saturday.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Thanks, guys.